Welcome to Who Yelling Now, Season 6, Episode 8, titled The Death of Waiting. Copyright Mackenzie, for entertainment purposes only. Season 6 asks us one question: what are we becoming? And today, I want to talk about something we are losing so quickly that we may not even realize it is dying. Waiting. There was a time when waiting was simply a part of being alive. You waited for the mail. You waited for someone to call. You waited for photographs to be developed before you knew whether you had captured the moment. You waited for the next episode of your favorite show. You waited for the library to open. You waited for food to cook. You waited for someone you loved to come home. You waited for answers, and sometimes you simply didn't know. There was nothing you could click, nothing you could refresh, nothing you could track, nothing you could ask to give you the answer immediately. You had to wait. And somewhere along the way, we decided waiting was a problem that needed to be solved. Faster delivery. Faster communication, faster transportation, faster food, faster entertainment, instant answers, instant access, instant gratification. We have spent generations removing the distance between wanting something and receiving it. And there is something remarkable about that. But I wonder if we ever stopped to ask what lived inside that distance. Because waiting wasn't empty. Something happened to us while we waited. We anticipated. We imagined. We worried. We hoped. We changed our minds. We practiced patience. Sometimes we discovered that the thing we desperately wanted on Monday didn't matter nearly as much by Friday. Waiting gave desire enough time to explain itself. And perhaps that is what we are actually killing. Not waiting, the human being we became while we waited. So today, I don't want to ask whether the world was better when everything took longer. I want to ask something much more uncomfortable. If we eventually eliminate the need to wait, what happens to the parts of us that were formed by waiting? Maybe waiting isn't inherently good or bad. Maybe it depends on what we're doing while we wait. Because there are things in life that cannot be hurried. There are journeys where not knowing what comes next is part of the journey itself. And sometimes knowing that the journey eventually ends is exactly what makes waiting for the next part so beautiful. This poem is called Waiting on My Life. Waiting on my life was the easiest journey I ever took, as I was aware of death. I knew where the road ended, just not where it would take me before I arrived. So I waited on mornings I had never seen, on people I had never met, on places whose names I did not yet know. I waited on love without knowing its face, on grief without knowing its name, on laughter I could not yet hear, on mistakes I had not yet learned to regret. I waited on myself to become someone I had no way of imagining. And strangely, I was never bothered, not knowing, because life never promised me a schedule. It simply kept arriving, a little at a time. A birthday, a goodbye, a beginning disguised as an ending I mistook for forever. And through it all, death waited too, not impatiently, not demanding that I hurry, just there, the one destination I knew existed, before I understood any of the roads. Perhaps that is why waiting on my life was so easy. I knew death would come. Life was the surprise. So I never needed to know everything before it happened. I only needed enough patience to discover what came next. Waiting on life assumes life is still happening while we wait. But what happens when we begin postponing the living? Not because someone told us we couldn't live, not because there was an actual barrier in front of us, but because we found perfectly reasonable reasons to keep saying, not now, not yet, maybe next year. And what happens when next year becomes 17 years? This story is titled The Sentence. Every summer, Maxine promised the children they would go next year. Not because they couldn't go. That distinction mattered to her. They could have gone. There was money in the bank. There was always money in the bank. But that money had a purpose. Emergency fund, car repairs, school clothes, the mortgage, insurance, the refrigerator that had started making that strange clicking sound, the water heater that was already 11 years old. And according to David, her husband, you know those things don't last forever. So when the children came running into the kitchen with pictures of beaches their friends had visited, Maxine would smile. Next year. And she meant it. Every single time. Maxine and David were responsible people. They had been married long enough to know how quickly one unexpected expense could turn a comfortable month into a frightening one. They weren't poor. They weren't wealthy. They lived in that enormous space in between where millions of families live. Bills paid, food in the refrigerator, cars that ran, a decent house, a little money left over, but never quite enough left over to feel comfortable spending it. So they waited. Their neighbors went to Hawaii. Maxine looked at the pictures online. Beautiful. She and David could probably do Hawaii someday. Not now. Someday. Her sister rented a cabin in the mountains for a long weekend and invited them. Maxine almost said yes. She even looked at the cabin online. Wood burning fireplace, 3 bedrooms, a porch overlooking the mountains. She imagined herself sitting there in the morning with a cup of coffee. Then David mentioned that the tires on Maxine's car probably had another 6 months in them. She closed the website. "We'll catch the next one," she told her sister. They waited. Their oldest child, Marcus, wanted to go to an amusement park for his 10th birthday. Maxine calculated the tickets, parking, food, hotels, gas. Then she looked at their savings account. They could afford it, technically, but technically wasn't safely. So they had a birthday party in the backyard instead. Marcus had fun. There was cake. His friends came. David grilled hamburgers. Maxine took pictures. Nobody was miserable. That was the strange thing about their life. Nobody was miserable. There was no great tragedy, no terrible hardship, no obvious reason to change anything. They were simply waiting for the savings account to reach the number that would make spending some of it feel safe. Unfortunately, every time they reached that number, the number changed. $10,000 would be enough. Then they reached 10,000. David said 15 would be safer. They reached 15. Then someone at David's job was laid off, maybe 20. They reached 20. Then Marcus needed braces. Then the refrigerator finally stopped clicking because it stopped working altogether. Then the roof needed repairs. Then their daughter, Maya, started talking about college. Life kept presenting perfectly reasonable arguments for waiting. And Maxine listened to every one of them. She became good at waiting. She could walk through a store, pick up something she loved, admired it, and put it back. Maybe later. She could open a restaurant menu, see exactly what she wanted, notice the price beside it, and ordered something else. She could hear friends say, "Come with us," and immediately calculate what coming with them would cost. Sometimes she didn't even ask David anymore. She already knew the answer. Not no. That would have been easier. Their answer was always, "Not yet." There was something hopeful about "not yet." No's sounded permanent. "Not yet" sounded responsible. "Not yet" meant someday was still coming. So Maxine built an entire life around someday. Someday they would take their children to the ocean. Someday they would drive across the country. Someday she and David would spend a weekend somewhere without worrying about how much the hotel cost. Someday she would order the lobster instead of asking whether the chicken was good. Someday she would buy Maya that ridiculous yellow coat the girl had fallen in love with. Someday they would stop looking at everybody else's photographs and start taking some of their own. There would be time. That was the assumption beneath everything. There would be time. Then the children became teenagers. It happened the way children always seem to happen to parents. Slowly, every day, suddenly, all at once. Marcus no longer ran into the kitchen carrying vacation pictures. He had friends, plans, a life that increasingly exited outside the house. Maya stopped asking when they were going to the ocean. She had apparently learned the family language. Not yet. Later, someday. Maxine didn't notice when her children stopped asking. Perhaps that would have bothered her more than it did. But there were college applications coming, car insurance for a teenage driver, retirement. The mortgage still had years left. There was always another responsible reason. And then, one night, Maxine woke at 2:03 a.m. in the morning. David was sitting on the edge of the bed. At first, she thought he was sick. David? He didn't turn around. The room was dark, except for the green numbers glowing from the alarm clock. 2:03. She pushed herself onto one elbow. You okay? David rubbed his hands together. He was quiet long enough for Maxine to become completely awake. Then he said it. One sentence. Not loudly, not angrily. There had been no argument, no slammed doors, no broken glass. Just the voice of a man who had slept beside her for 17 years. I don't want to be married anymore. Let's get a divorce. That was it. 17 years. One sentence. Maxine stared at the back of his head. For several seconds, she didn't understand the words. She understood each word individually. I don't want married, divorce. Perfectly ordinary words, but together they seemed incapable of belonging in her bedroom. She looked around. The dresser they had bought after saving for 6 months, the television they waited for a holiday sale to purchase, the curtains she had wanted to replace 3 years ago, but decided the old ones were still perfectly good. The ceiling fan David installed himself because paying someone to do it seemed wasteful. Everything in that room had been negotiated with tomorrow. Maxine looked towards the closet. On the top shelf was a small travel bag she had bought years earlier. It still had the luggage tag attached, never used. Suddenly, absurdly, that was what she thought about. The bag, then the savings account. All that money, all those careful decisions, all those weekends they didn't take, all those dinners they didn't eat, all those places they didn't go, all those times they said, next year, next year, next year. Maxine had spent 17 years protecting a future that had just walked into her bedroom at 2:00 in the morning and announced that it wasn't coming. She didn't sleep again that night. And somewhere between 2:03 and sunrise, something inside Maxine changed. Not broke, changed. She realized she had always thought waiting was something life required of her. It wasn't. Much of the time, waiting had been a decision. Their decision, sometimes David's. sometimes hers, sometimes nobody's. Sometimes waiting had simply become the rule because they had followed it for so long that neither remembered making it. 3 months later, Maxine stood in the kitchen with Marcus and Maya. She placed her laptop on the table. "Pick somewhere." Marcus looked at her. "What?" "Somewhere you want to go." Maya laughed. "Like where?" "Anywhere we can reasonably get to." The children looked at each other. They were waiting for the catch. Maxine recognized that look. She had taught it to them. Marcus finally said, "The ocean." Maxine smiled. "The ocean it is." They didn't fly first class. They didn't stay at a luxury resort. Their hotel was 2 blocks from the beach. Maxine still compared prices. She still used coupons. She still packed snacks for the drive. She had not become irresponsible. She had simply stopped confusing responsibility with postponement. The first morning, they walked to the beach before sunrise. Maya took off her shoes and ran towards the water. Marcus followed. Maxine stood behind them holding 3 pairs of shoes. Then she dropped the shoes in the sand and ran in too. The water was freezing. They screamed. They laughed. Marcus splashed his mother. Maxine threatened him. Maya recorded the entire thing. And for the first time in years, Maxine wasn't thinking about what the moment cost. She was thinking about the fact that it was happening. After that, they began doing things. Not constantly, not extravagantly, just now. A weekend visiting Maxine's sisters, a road trip, a concert Maya desperately wanted to see, a restaurant Marcus had been talking about for months. One afternoon, Maxine bought herself a pair of earrings she had absolutely no need for. She stood at the register, holding and almost putting them back. Almost. Then she heard herself whisper, "Not everything has to wait." She bought them. Months later, while cleaning out a closet, Maxine found an old notebook. Inside was a list. She recognized David's handwritings beside hers. Things we wanted to do. Hawaii, Grand Canyon, New Orleans, take the kids to New York, weekend cabin, see the Pacific Ocean. Underneath the list, David had written, "When we can afford it." Maxine sat on the floor, holding the notebook. For a moment, she felt angry. Then she realized she couldn't blame David. Her handwriting was on the page too. They had agreed. They had waited together. They had believed together. And perhaps that was the hardest part to accept. Nobody had imprisoned them. There had been no locked gate, no guard, no law preventing them from leaving. They had simply been 2 people standing on one side of life saying, "Not yet." Maxine closed the notebook. From downstairs, Maya called her name. "Mom, Marcus wants to know if we're still going Saturday." Maxine smiled. "Yes. Even if it rains." Maxine looked at the old list one last time. For 17 years, she had believed that life would eventually present the perfect moment. Enough money, enough security, enough time, enough certainty. Then at 2:03 one morning, one sentence destroyed that illusion. She finally understood. There would always be a reason to wait, and sometimes the reason would be a very good one, but a good reason could consume a year just as easily as a bad one. Then another, until the children stopped asking, until the luggage grew dusty, until someday quietly became never. Maxine put the notebook back on the shelf. Yes, she called downstairs, even if it rains. And this time, she didn't wait. This poem is called Waiting on My Life. If my death arrives, tell him I waited. I waited until I was bored. I waited until I was unloved. I waited until I hated everyone. I waited until all food tastes like dust. I waited until I could feel no more. I waited until I was alive. I waited, then I left to seek life. If my life arrives, tell her I waited. I waited until I was bored. I waited until I was unloved. I waited until I hated everyone. I waited until all food tastes like dust. I waited until I could feel no more. I waited until I wish I was dead. I waited, then I left to seek death. So, my dearest wonderful listeners, what are we becoming? A civilization increasingly unwilling to wait? Maybe. But after thinking about this episode, I am not convinced impatience is the real danger. I think the danger is forgetting how to choose what deserves our waiting. Some things should be waited on. A wound needs time to heal. A child needs time to grow. Trust needs time to form. Grief refuses our schedule. Some dreams require preparation. Some decisions deserve another night. Waiting isn't always wasted time. Sometimes waiting is the work. But there is another kind of waiting. Waiting for enough money, enough confidence, enough certainty, enough permission. Waiting until the children are older. Waiting until work slows down. Waiting until retirement. Waiting until everything is finally positioned perfectly. Enough for us to begin living the life we've been preparing to live. And that's the waiting I wonder about. Because death doesn't need us to be ready. It doesn't care whether the savings account finally reached the number. It doesn't care whether the luggage still has the tag attached. It doesn't care how many things remain on the list marked someday. And perhaps that's why the death of waiting shouldn't mean the death of patience. Maybe it means the death of unexamined waiting. Knowing why I'm waiting. Knowing what I'm waiting for. And occasionally having the courage to ask, who told me I had to wait? Because sometimes there is a real answer, and sometimes there isn't one. This is Who Yelling Now? What are we becoming? And maybe becoming more human isn't about learning to wait or refuse to wait. Maybe it's learning to recognize when waiting is a part of our lives and when waiting has become our life. Thank you for being with me for another episode. Share, tell a friend, come back. I am Olga Foreign. Enjoy your day.